The church bells had fallen silent. The guests sat frozen in their pews, a collective held breath that pressed against Imogen Hartley's spine like a physical weight. She stood at the altar in her cream silk gown, the veil heavy against her shoulders, staring at the empty space where Edmund Pritchard should have been standing. The vicar cleared his throat for the third time, his prayer book trembling slightly in his hands. "Perhaps," he began, his voice cracking, "perhaps the gentleman has been delayed by—" "He is not coming." The words came from the back of the church, deep and certain. Every head turned. Imogen turned last, her fingers crushing the stems of her bouquet until the thorns bit through her gloves. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon light. Tall, impossibly still, dressed in black that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. He moved down the aisle with a predator's grace, and the crowd parted without thinking, pressing back into their pews as if he carried winter with him. "Forgive the intrusion," his voice carried effortlessly through the vaulted space, "but I could not allow this farce to continue." Imogen's aunt gasped somewhere behind her. The vicar sputtered, but Imogen found herself unable to look away from the stranger's face as he drew closer, pale as marble, with features that belonged on a Renaissance sculpture. And his eyes, dark as a moonless night, fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget, momentarily, that she had just been abandoned at the altar. "Who are you?" she managed, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Someone who has waited a very long time for this moment." He stopped 3 paces from her, close enough that she could see he cast no shadow on the stone floor, though the afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows. "Edmund Pritchard is, at this moment, boarding a ship to America with your cousin Philippa and a considerable portion of your dowry." The church erupted. Voices rose in shock and outrage. Imogen's aunt shrieked, but Imogen herself felt nothing but a strange, cold clarity settling over her shoulders like a cloak. "How do you know this?" she asked quietly. "Because I have been watching you for 3 months, Miss Hartley, waiting to see if you would discover the truth yourself." His lips curved, not quite a smile. "You did not, so I decided to intervene." Watching me. She should have been frightened. She should have been calling for help. Instead, she felt something else entirely, a spark of anger, clean and bright. Like some sort of specter? Something like that. 3 months earlier, Imogen had arrived in Bath with precisely 43 pounds to her name, a letter of introduction to a distant cousin, and the knowledge that she had exactly 1 season to secure a husband before her small inheritance ran out entirely. Her parents had died of fever the previous winter, leaving her with nothing but debts and the fading respectability of a minor gentry name. Edmund Pritchard had seemed like salvation. Prosperous, pleasant-looking, eager to court her despite her modest circumstances. She had ignored the small voice that whispered he was too eager, too quick to discuss her finances, too interested in the small trust her grandmother had left her. She had been a fool, but she had also been desperate. Now she stood in a church full of pitying stares and scandalized whispers, her humiliation complete, facing a stranger who claimed to have been watching her like some sort of guardian demon. "I do not require your intervention," she said, lifting her chin. "Nor did I ask for it." "No." He tilted his head, studying her. "You asked for nothing. You simply endured. It was remarkable, really. 3 months of watching Edmund Pritchard paw through your belongings, inventory your assets, court your cousin in shadowed corners, and you said nothing. I did not know. You knew." His voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "You simply chose not to see. There is a difference." The truth of it struck her like a slap. She had known, had felt the wrongness of Edmund's courtship in her bones, but had pushed it aside because she could not afford to be particular, could not afford to listen to instinct when survival demanded pragmatism. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. To offer you a choice. He extended his hand, palm up. His fingers were long and elegant, and she noticed with a strange detachment that his skin held no warmth, no flush of blood beneath the surface. Come with me now. Leave this place and these people who would watch you suffer for their entertainment. Or stay and spend the next year living down this scandal while your cousin spends your money in New York. Come with you where? I do not even know your name. Nathaniel Corvus. He said it as if she should recognize it. When she did not react, a shadow crossed his mouth across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or disappointment. And I am offering you my protection, my home, my resources. In exchange for what? Nothing you are not willing to give. It was the worst possible answer. Vague, ominous, the stuff of penny dreadfuls and cautionary tales. Imogen looked down at his outstretched hand, then back at the sea of faces watching her. Her aunt's expression was already calculating, no doubt planning how to salvage her own reputation from this disaster. The vicar looked relieved that the ceremony had been interrupted before he had to decide whether to proceed. Edmund's friends wore expressions of poorly concealed amusement. Not one person had risen to defend her. Not one had questioned Edmund's absence or offered comfort. She had spent 3 months making herself smaller, quieter, more palatable, and it had earned her nothing but this moment of public humiliation. Very well, she said, and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, cool and certain. Excellent choice. The carriage that waited outside was black lacquered wood with no crest on the door, drawn by 4 horses so dark they seemed to drink the light. Imogen climbed inside without looking back, though she heard her aunt's voice raised in protest behind her. Nathaniel Corvus settled across from her, and the carriage lurched into motion. You are taking this remarkably well, he observed. Am I? Imogen pulled off her veil and dropped it on the seat beside her. The pins holding her hair had given her a headache. She began removing them one by one, letting her dark hair fall around her shoulders. I suppose I am in shock, or perhaps I have simply run out of the capacity for surprise. Most women would be frightened. Most women have not just been abandoned at the altar by a fortune hunter who seduced their cousin. She met his gaze directly. Besides, you do not frighten me. I should. Why? Because you claim to have been watching me? Because you appeared at a dramatically convenient moment? Because your carriage is rather ostentatiously sinister? She raised an eyebrow. If you meant me harm, you would hardly have interrupted my wedding to a man who was robbing me blind. His lips twitched. Sound logic. I am not entirely without sense, Mr. Corvus, despite evidence to the contrary. She folded her hands in her lap, the white gloves already stained with sap from her crushed bouquet. Now, where are you taking me, and what do you actually want? I am taking you to my home in the countryside about an hour from here. As for what I want? He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I want to know if you remember me. Remember you? We have never met. Are you certain? Imogen studied his face, searching for any flicker of recognition. There was something in the set of his features, the particular darkness of his eyes, that tugged at the edges of memory, but she could not place it. I am certain I would remember meeting someone so... She gestured vaguely at him. Theatrical. Theatrical. He smiled, and for a moment he looked almost human. I have been called worse. I imagine you have. They fell into silence. Outside the window, Bath's elegant crescents gave way to rolling countryside. The afternoon sun slanted low across the fields, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Imogen watched it pass, trying to feel something about the ruins of her life, but finding only a strange numbness. You are not going to ask me why I was watching you? Nathaniel said eventually. I assumed you would tell me when you were ready, or when it became relevant. She glanced at him. You do not strike me as a man who explains himself unnecessarily. Observant. I have had to be. The carriage turned onto a narrow lane lined with ancient oaks. The trees grew so thick overhead that they blocked out the sun, plunging them into premature twilight. Imogen felt the temperature drop, saw her breath mist faintly in the air. "We are nearly there," Nathaniel said. The house appeared suddenly, as if it had simply materialized from the shadows. 3 stories of gray stone, covered in ivy, with narrow windows that reflected the dying light like watchful eyes. It should have been forbidding. Instead, Imogen felt an odd sense of familiarity, as if she had seen it before in a dream. The carriage stopped. Nathaniel descended first, then offered his hand to help her down. His touch was still cool, still certain, and Imogen found herself wondering what kind of man felt no warmth at all. "Welcome," he said, "to Ashford Hall." The name struck her like a bell. Ashford Hall. She knew that name. But from where? The interior was all dark wood and darker shadows. A housekeeper appeared, elderly, stern-faced, dressed in black that matched her employer's. She looked at Imogen's wedding dress without comment. "Mrs. Blackwood will show you to your rooms," Nathaniel said. "Dinner is at 8. We can discuss the particulars of your situation then." "The particulars of my situation," Imogen repeated. "How diplomatic." "I am trying to be considerate." "Do not bother on my account. I prefer plain speaking." "Very well. You are now homeless, penniless, and thoroughly compromised by leaving your wedding to travel unchaperoned with a strange man. Your reputation is destroyed, your family will disown you, and you have nowhere else to go." He said it without cruelty, simply stating facts. "Does that suit your preference for plain speaking?" "Admirably." Imogen stripped off her gloves. "And your offer is?" "Room and board, safety. Time to decide what you wish to do with your life, now that you are free of the constraints of respectable society. In exchange for?" "Your company, your conversation," he paused, "your memory, if it returns." "You are obsessed with this idea that we have met. Because we have, 7 years ago. You were 16. I was," he smiled faintly, "older." 7 years ago. Imogen had been 16, yes. Her parents had been alive and they had traveled to… where? London? No, somewhere smaller, somewhere with a name she could not quite grasp. "I do not remember," she said finally. "No, I did not think you would." He turned toward the stairs. "But perhaps in time, you will." Her rooms were surprisingly comfortable. A bedroom with a 4-poster bed, a sitting room with a fire already laid, and a dressing room with a wardrobe full of gowns in her size. Imogen stood in the center of the bedroom, still wearing her wedding dress, and tried to process the strangeness of her situation. She had left her wedding. She was staying in the home of a man she did not know, and instead of fear or regret, she felt only a curious sense of relief. Mrs. Blackwood appeared in the doorway. "Shall I help you change, miss?" "Please." Imogen turned her back to allow the housekeeper to unfasten the dozens of tiny buttons. "Mrs. Blackwood, how long have you worked for Mr. Corvus?" 20 years, miss." "And what manner of man is he?" "A good one, by his lights." The housekeeper's hands were efficient, practiced, though not a man in the conventional sense. "What do you mean?" "You will learn soon enough." The dress fell away, pooling at Imogen's feet. "He does not keep secrets well, never has." Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 20 but held only 2. Nathaniel sat at the head of the table, Imogen to his right. Between them lay enough silver and crystal to stock a small shop. "This is excessive," Imogen observed. "Mrs. Blackwood insists on maintaining standards." He gestured to the footman, who began serving soup. "Even when I would prefer simplicity." "And what do you prefer?" "Honesty, directness, people who say what they mean." He watched her taste the soup. "You, for instance." I am not certain I have been particularly honest. I spent 3 months pretending Edmund Pritchard was a suitable husband. You were honest with yourself, even if you did not act on it. That is more than most people manage. Imogen set down her spoon. Why were you watching me, Mr. Corvus? The real reason. Because 7 years ago, you saved my life. She stared at him. I did no such thing. You do not remember, but you did. He leaned back in his chair, his own soup untouched. I was injured. Badly. You found me in a church, not the one you were married in today, a different one. Smaller. In a village called Thornbury. Thornbury. The name unlocked something. A memory, hazy and incomplete. Her parents had stopped there on the way to visit relatives. There had been a storm. They had taken shelter in a church. I remember the church, she said slowly. But not you. I was in the crypt, hiding. You heard me and came down, even though you were frightened. His voice softened. You were just a child, but you brought me water, bandages from your petticoat. You sat with me until dawn. I remember. Imogen pressed her fingers to her temples. I remember being frightened, and then not frightened. There was someone who... She looked up sharply. You told me stories about places you had traveled. You made me laugh. Yes. But you looked different, younger. No, I looked exactly as I do now. You simply did not notice because you were 16, and I was careful. He met her gaze. I have not aged a day since you met me, Imogen, nor will I age a day hence. The implication settled like sediment between them. Imogen's rational mind rejected it immediately. Impossible, absurd, the stuff of Gothic novels. But her instincts, the same instincts she had ignored about Edmund, whispered that it was true. You are telling me you are a vampire, she said flatly. I am telling you I am not human. Vampire is one word for it. There are others. And you have been watching me for 7 years because I brought you water and bandages? Because you saved my life when you had no reason to. Because you were kind to a monster in a crypt. He leaned forward. Because I have spent 7 years trying to forget you and failing utterly. Imogen should have run, should have screamed, should have done any number of sensible things. Instead, she picked up her wineglass and took a long drink. Well, she said finally, that explains the excessive dramatics. He blinked. That is your response? What would you prefer, swooning, hysteria? She set down the glass. You are not human. Very well. You have been watching me. Somewhat unsettling, but given that you just saved me from a disastrous marriage, I shall overlook it. You claim I saved your life 7 years ago. I have no reason to doubt you. She met his gaze. What I want to know is what happens now. Now? Do you expect me to stay here indefinitely? Are you offering me employment, marriage, transformation into whatever you are? She raised an eyebrow. I do appreciate the rescue, Mr. Corvus, but I would like to understand the terms of our arrangement. For a long moment he simply stared at her. Then he began to laugh, a genuine, startled sound that transformed his face entirely. You are remarkable, he said. I am practical. There is a difference. No. You are remarkable. He sobered, though his eyes still held warmth. I am offering you sanctuary. For as long as you wish it, I expect nothing in return except your company. If you choose to leave, I will provide you with funds to establish yourself elsewhere. If you choose to stay, he paused. Then we shall see what develops. And if I choose to stay, will you continue watching me like some sort of obsessed specter? I will endeavor to watch you only at socially appropriate times. How reassuring. They finished dinner in companionable silence. Afterward, Nathaniel showed her the library, a 2-story room lined floor to ceiling with books. Imogen ran her fingers along the spines, marveling at the collection. You may read anything you like, he said. I have had several centuries to accumulate them. Several centuries. She pulled down a volume of poetry. How old are you exactly? Old enough to have known better than to fall in love with a 16-year-old girl who brought me water in a crypt. Imogen turned to face him. You said you tried to forget me. I did try. I failed. He moved closer, though he maintained a careful distance. You were kind to me when I was at my weakest. You asked for nothing, expected nothing. You simply helped. Do you know how rare that is? I was a child. You were yourself, and that self was extraordinary. I am not extraordinary. I am a penniless spinster who was nearly tricked into marriage by a fortune hunter. You are a woman who chose to leave a church full of people rather than accept humiliation quietly, who demanded plain speaking from a vampire, who has not once in the past 6 hours acted as though you are a victim. He smiled. That is extraordinary. Imogen felt heat rise to her cheeks. You are trying to flatter me. I am trying to make you see yourself as I see you. And how is that? As someone worth waiting centuries for. The next morning, Imogen woke to find Mrs. Blackwood laying out a riding habit. Mr. Corvus thought you might enjoy seeing the grounds, the housekeeper said. If you ride? I do. Imogen sat up, pushing hair from her face. Is he awake? He does not sleep, miss. Not in the conventional sense. Of course he does not. She dressed and found Nathaniel waiting in the stable yard, holding the reins of 2 horses. He had traded his black coat for something more practical, though he still looked like he had stepped out of a painting. I thought you might like to see the estate, he said. It is not large, but it has a certain charm. They rode out across fields still wet with morning dew. The sun was bright, and Imogen noticed that Nathaniel kept to the shadows where possible, though he did not seem to be in pain. Sunlight does not burn you? She asked. It weakens me, makes me less than I am, but it does not destroy me. That is a myth. What else is a myth? Garlic, religious symbols, running water. He guided his horse around a fallen log, though silver is quite unpleasant. And you drink blood? Yes. Human blood? When necessary, though I prefer not to. He glanced at her. Does that frighten you? Should it? Most people would say yes. I am not most people. She urged her horse into a canter. Show me the rest. They spent the morning riding, and Imogen found herself relaxing in ways she had not in months. Nathaniel was easy company, intelligent, well-read, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. He told her about the estate, the village nearby, the tenants who worked the land. They know what you are? She asked. Some suspect. None speak of it. I am a good landlord. That buys a certain amount of discretion. And Mrs. Blackwood? Knows everything, has known from the beginning. Her husband was my steward before he died. She chose to stay. Why? You would have to ask her. Though I suspect it is because I pay well and do not interfere with her running of the household. They stopped at the top of a hill overlooking the house. From here, Imogen could see the full extent of the grounds, the gardens, the woods, the small lake that glittered in the distance. It is beautiful, she said. It is yours, if you want it. She turned to look at him. What do you mean? I mean that I am offering you more than sanctuary, Imogen. I am offering you a home, a life, a future that is not dictated by the need to secure a husband or maintain respectability. He dismounted and came to stand beside her horse. I am offering you freedom. In exchange for what? She had to ask again, had to be certain. Your company, your presence, the possibility that you might, in time, come to care for me as I care for you. He looked up at her, his dark eyes serious. I am not asking you to love me. I am asking you to give me the chance to earn your regard. Imogen's heart beat faster. And if I do not? If I stay here and never come to care for you in that way? Then you stay here as my friend and companion, and I count myself fortunate for that much. You have waited 7 years for me. You cannot tell me you would be content with friendship. I would be content with whatever you chose to give me. He said it simply, as if it were obvious. I have had centuries to learn patience, Imogen. I can wait a little longer. She stayed. Days turned into weeks, and Imogen found herself settling into the rhythm of Ashford Hall. She read in the library, walked in the gardens, learned the names of the servants and the tenants, and she spent her evenings with Nathaniel, talking about everything and nothing. He was, she discovered, surprisingly easy to talk to. He had lived through centuries of history and could speak with authority on subjects ranging from the fall of Rome to the latest scientific discoveries. But he was also genuinely interested in her thoughts, her opinions, her experiences. "Tell me about your parents," he said one evening as they sat in the library. "They were kind, impractical, terrible with money." Imogen smiled at the memory. "My father was a scholar. He spent more on books than on food. My mother was a romantic. She believed in true love and happy endings. And you?" "I believed in survival, in doing what was necessary." She looked down at her hands. "I thought marrying Edmund was necessary. I was wrong. You were desperate. There is a difference." "Is there? I was willing to marry a man I did not love because I needed security. That is not admirable." "It is human." He moved to sit beside her. "You did what you thought you had to do. There is no shame in that. You say that because you have never had to make such choices. Do not assume that immortality means freedom from difficult choices, Imogen. I have made my share of mistakes. Some of them took decades to correct." She looked at him. "Such as?" "Such as leaving you in that church 7 years ago without telling you what you had done for me, without giving you any way to find me again." His voice was quiet. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought it was better if you forgot me entirely, but I could not forget you. So you watched me instead." "Yes, from a distance, making certain you were safe, telling myself I was being noble." He smiled ruefully. "I was being a coward." "Why?" "Because I was afraid that if I approached you, you would reject me, that you would see me as a monster, that the kindness you showed me in the crypt was simply the impulse of a compassionate child, not something that could survive into adulthood." Imogen reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cool in hers, but steady. "I am not a child anymore." "No, you are not. And I do not see you as a monster." "What do you see?" She considered the question seriously. "I see a man who has lived a very long time and is very lonely, who saved me from a terrible mistake, who has been unfailingly kind and patient." She squeezed his hand. "I see someone I am beginning to care for quite a lot." His expression transformed. "Imogen, I am not saying I love you, not yet, but I am saying that I could, given time." She met his gaze. "Is that enough?" "It is more than enough." The turning point came a month after her arrival. Imogen was walking in the village when she encountered her aunt, the same aunt who had been planning her wedding, who had introduced her to Edmund, who had watched her humiliation in the church without a word of support. "Imogen," her aunt's voice was cold, "I did not expect to see you here. I live nearby now." "With that man, that Corvus creature." Her aunt's lips thinned. "You have disgraced yourself utterly. Your parents would be ashamed." Once those words would have cut deep. But Imogen found she felt only a distant pity for this woman who measured worth in reputation and respectability. "My parents would be glad I escaped a fortune hunter," she said calmly, "and they would be happy I found somewhere I am valued for myself, not my dowry." "Valued? You are his mistress, his kept woman. I am his guest and his friend, which is more than I ever was to you." Her aunt's face flushed. "You will regret this. When he tires of you, when he casts you aside—" "He will not." Imogen said it with certainty. "Because he is not Edmund Pritchard. He is not you. He is someone who sees me as I am and values that." Can you say the same? Her aunt had no answer. She turned and walked away, her back rigid with outrage. Imogen stood in the village square, feeling lighter than she had in years. She had spoken her truth. She had defended herself. And she had not apologized for choosing her own path. That evening she found Nathaniel in the library. He looked up as she entered, and she saw the question in his eyes. "I met my aunt in the village," she said. "I heard. Mrs. Blackwood has spies everywhere." He set aside his book. "Are you all right?" "I am better than all right. I am free." She crossed the room to stand before him. "I have been thinking about what you said, about offering me freedom, about waiting for me to decide what I want. And have you decided?" "I have." She took a breath. "I want to stay, not as your guest, not as your friend, as something more." He stood slowly. "Imogen, you do not have to." "I know I do not have to. I want to." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "You have waited 7 years for me. I think I have been waiting for you too, without knowing it. Waiting for someone who would see me, value me, want me for myself, and not for what I could provide. I have wanted you since the moment you brought me water in that crypt, since you sat with a monster and made him feel human again." His hand covered hers. "I will want you for as long as I exist. Then kiss me." He did. It was gentle at first, almost tentative, as if he feared she might break. But Imogen pressed closer, her hand sliding into his hair, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, she was breathless and he was smiling. "I have wanted to do that for 7 years," he said. "You should have done it sooner. I was waiting for you to be ready. I am ready now." She looked up at him. "I want this. I want you. I want the life you are offering me. Even knowing what I am? Especially knowing what you are." She touched his face again. "Because you are not a monster, Nathaniel. You are someone who has lived long enough to understand the value of kindness, of patience, of love. I do love you. I have loved you for 7 years. I know. And I'm beginning to love you too." She smiled. "Give me a little more time, and I will be certain. Take all the time you need. I have nothing but time." They were married in the spring, in the same small church in Thornbury where Imogen had first found him. The vicar who performed the ceremony was elderly and half-blind, and did not question why the groom wore gloves or why the wedding was held at sunset. Imogen wore a simple dress of pale blue silk with wildflowers in her hair. Nathaniel wore black as always, but his eyes were warm as he took her hand. "I, Nathaniel Corvus, take you, Imogen Hartley, to be my wife. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." The words hovered like smoke above the altar. Death would not part them, not in the conventional sense. Imogen had made her choice. She would stay with him, age beside him for a time, and when the time came, she would choose transformation, choose eternity with him. It was not a choice she made lightly, but it was a choice she made freely, knowing exactly what she was giving up and what she was gaining. "I, Imogen Hartley, take you, Nathaniel Corvus, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, for as long as we both shall live." For as long as we both shall live, it would be a very long time indeed. The vicar pronounced them married. Nathaniel kissed her, gentle and reverent, and Imogen felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was where she was meant to be, with him. In this life they would build together. Years passed. Imogen grew older, though slowly. Nathaniel remained unchanged, as he always had. They traveled together, saw the world, returned always to Ashford Hall. And when Imogen was 43, when her hair had begun to gray and her face to line, she came to him in the library where they had spent so many evenings. "I am ready," she said. He looked up from his book. "Are you certain?" "I am certain. I have had a good life, a full life, but I want more. I want forever with you. It will hurt. I know. You will lose the sunlight, lose the warmth of human touch, lose so many small things you do not even realize you value. I will gain you. That is worth any price." He set aside his book and came to her. "I love you, Imogen Corvus. I have loved you for 25 years. I will love you for 25,000 more. Then make me yours, truly and forever." The transformation was everything he had warned her it would be: painful, disorienting, terrifying. But Nathaniel held her through it all, his voice steady in her ear, his presence an anchor in the storm. And when it was over, when she opened her eyes to a world transformed by new senses, new awareness, new power, he was there. "Welcome home," he said. Imogen looked at him, at her husband, her companion, her eternal love, and smiled. She had been abandoned at an altar once, left behind by a man who saw her only as a means to an end, but she had found something far better, someone who had waited centuries for her, someone who would wait centuries more, if necessary. She had found love, real, true, eternal love. And she would never be alone again. She took his hand, her fingers now as cool as his, and together they walked out into the night. Their night. The first of an infinite number of nights, stretching before them like an unwritten story. "What shall we do first?" she asked. "Whatever you wish. We have all the time in the world." "Then let us start with this." She pulled him close and kissed him, tasting forever on his lips. When she drew back, she was smiling. "I love you, Nathaniel Corvus. I have loved you for 25 years, and I will love you for 25,000 more." His answering smile was radiant, transforming his face into something almost mortal in its joy. "That is all I have ever wanted." They stood together in the doorway of Ashford Hall, neither casting a shadow in the moonlight, both finally, completely home.